what I wanted to do was not spend too long me talking and you guys just having to listen, but I just wanted to go through a couple of slides that I think to kind of set the scene of what I think that we will hopefully cover today. We'll then go into asking or asking our panel members, I guess, a couple of questions that have been submitted before. From there, I'll kind of lead off in the conversation with a couple of questions. Throughout that, you'll get an opportunity to ask some of yours, and we'll just see where the session takes us, and hopefully there's a lot of value that you get from that. So I guess when I think of the end of financial year, what worries me normally is that you've got multiple systems and platforms, you've got lots of data everywhere, you're not sure or can't remember what you've done, and you're actually relying on your memory as opposed to having that structure in place. So I think, having reflected on what I think will come out of the session today, is that a lot of the advice that we'll be talking about is going to be about setting up systems or practices or, getting into a routine. So I just wanted to kind of set the scene. I think that is where the problem is for a lot of people and why there is a lot of stress around the end of financial year. I'm hoping that with some of the advice and the things that we talk about today, that we kind of slow that speed down to what Julie was saying before, and we can just kind of take a step back and be able to work through it. Can you just go to the next slide for me, Esther? I think based on that, the really important thing is managing your admin then. So how do you actually get ready? So from my opinion, you want an accounting system of sorts. You want to be able to actually have, even if you haven't taken a photo, but have a shoebox of receipts. That definitely helps. How do you actually manage a bank account? Have you got a business bank account versus a personal one? And a few other bits and pieces. I might just pause there though, and throw this one to the experts. I'm not sure, Julie, if you've got any ideas about what are the 5 things that sole traders or small businesses should have handy, in June leading up into the end of the financial year.
Okay, thanks, Johan. Look, I think basically being organised from the beginning of the financial year is probably point 1. Because by the time everyone gets to the end of the financial year, it's hard to find receipts or where you've put them or that sort of thing. Basically get a system started. And I think my outlook has always been to people in small business, create your business systems as though you're going to be a big business and do that from the beginning. So because people tend to put it off and leave it and things like that. So have a good system, whatever that is for you, taking receipts, photos of receipts on your phone, then uploading it to Soul, or to have a filing system or something, but get a system. That's the main thing. Spend a few dollars and get some good folders and things like that. Basically also, have a bit of a plan at the beginning of the financial year. But if you do find yourself in a bit of a mess towards the end of the financial year, just take that time and, go through things, work out where you've spread everything, and just try and get a system going. That would be my main advice.
And make it easier on your accountant these days, because there's no reason why you can't look after your accountant by using software. I mean, 5 or 10 years ago, you could kind of get away with using spreadsheets and stuff like that, but these days it just doesn't make any sense. So to use online software like Soul is really just a requirement, I think, of any small business these days, regardless how small it is, because it's very affordable and it's easy to learn, and generally it will save you money at the end of the year. There's nothing in the world worse when you come to the end of the year and we're talking to a client and they go, "Oh, I'll send my spreadsheets to you." We go, "Oh no, here we go again. That's going to take us twice as long or 3 times as long," which we have to bill for, of course. So that's the important part of that, I think, these days. There's no excuse not to use software.
Yeah. And what about the cost of that software, Stephen? Is that tax deductible? Or?
I'm glad you asked. Usually, no, it is, of course. Of course, yes. You have to pay tax to get it back, of course. A lot of people don't understand that, but yeah, it's fully tax deductible. Yeah.
Awesome. And I guess just, Julie, you were saying there before, obviously setting up your system. If you didn't have a system in place, you might still be on Excel, but maybe next year you want to kind of clean up your business a little bit, get a little bit more sophisticated. I'm assuming that, you can actually have your receipts digitally stored. So, this year you may have it all physical, but you could convert that, take photos and actually move some of those things into a digital system. Is that all allowed and legal?
Yeah, for sure. As long as you've got a copy of the actual receipt. And, we do live in a fantastic technical age these days where you can take a photo of a receipt, take the photo when you actually purchase something, upload it to Soul, and it's all there. So, you know, it's really, there is no excuses these days, but life is hectic. People get busy. And I think if people just don't know where to start, but a really good basic software, you know, is really helpful to both you and to your accountant. And I think that, you know, if you can just start getting your receipts organised, and they're fine in digital form, they're fine to use.
A lot of people don't realise that the good thing about the software now is you can take a photo of that receipt and those numbers are in your system immediately. Whereas back in the good old days, is you'd hang on to that receipt for a month or two, eventually get it in there, and then you'll find out 2 months late that you're not making any money, of course, and you can't take corrective action. So that the whole thing around bookkeeping these days is real time to understand where you're at this week in your books to make sure that you're profitable, you don't have any issues.
Yep. I mean, one of the biggest, this is talking from personal experience and talking to our customers, one of the biggest time savers nowadays is you take a photo of that receipt and it actually, you know, extracts the information into the system automatically. So you don't even have to type it in anymore, which is just even better, which is fantastic. Cool. What I might do is, just to make sure that we get through those questions, is I might just throw to the 2 questions that we had submitted beforehand. No surprise, they are both tax related. So I'm going to just have to unfortunately keep you on the podium, Julie and Stephen. But the first one was asked, it said, I have just bought a new car out of necessity and used my car for approximately 50% business purposes as evidenced by my logbook. What do I need to do to reflect this in my tax, and how does my business benefit?
Okay, so if you have kept an ATO compliant logbook, and by ATO compliant, we mean that you have recorded all your kilometres for 12 weeks. So that's your business and your private kilometres. And then you work out a percentage that relates to your business based on those kilometres. So you will also have kept all your receipts, your fuel, your rego, your insurance, anything else. If it's a new vehicle, obviously all the details of the purchase of the vehicle. So once you've got all that information, pretty much your accountant will be able to take over from there, but they need the good record keeping. So it will benefit your business in that it will help reduce your taxable income. And if your taxable income is reduced, then that will mean you will have less tax to pay. But record keeping is pretty important with motor vehicles. And the logbook, the good news about a logbook is, while it's can be a bit of a strain to keep it for 12 weeks, although there are lots of new digital ways to do a logbook. Once you've done it for 12 weeks, you don't need to do another one for 5 years unless your usage changes. So if you're in the same business, you will be able to use that logbook for the next 5 years.
And so, Julie, I think, you know, when I think of the logbook, and maybe it's just the old terminology, but I'm still thinking of like when I did my L's and I have to, you know, write the odometer readings. You said they're digital. So there's obviously lots of systems out there nowadays that you can actually use to do your tracking. And that's all accepted as long as you do it for all of the trips, I'd imagine. Is that right?
It is. And as long as you have one that records the odometer reading, it must record the odometer reading. There's a few out there that don't. They just record the kilometres, but the ATO, if ever you're audited, will want odometer readings. So so that's the most important thing when you're looking at them.
And so let's say that I do have some business kilometres, but I didn't know that the logbook existed. Is there another way for me to kind of claim something back, or have I missed out for the year?
No, you haven't missed out at all. So if you get to the end of the financial year and you go to see your tax agent or accountant and they ask you for your logbook, you haven't kept one, but you have used your vehicle for business purposes, you can claim up to 5,000 kilometres without a logbook, but you still have to be able to verify that you used it. So you might be somebody who goes to the post office 3 times a week or something like that. You would be able to estimate how many kilometres you do. And as long as we can't claim over 5,000, that's where we're limited by the ATO, but we do have a rate that increases each year, and that still does give you a fairly good deduction of about $4,000 these days if you're claiming the full 5,000.
I'll throw to the next one then. So the next question is also is actually, sorry, I've just misread that. It says this is not an EOFY question, but rather a general question. So when it comes to entering expenses, is it best to create the transaction or just allocate it when it appears on the bank feed? Shashira, I think this is actually one for you. What do you think?
My preference would be to keep the source of truth as one and always allocate it to the bank feed. As soon as the bank feed comes through, just click on match it to the expense or the invoice. You can create the expense and invoice directly from the match or reconciliation. So it makes it a lot more easier and reducing duplicates.
Yeah, and I guess it would be obviously, like Julie was saying before, it would make sense that if you walk into Officeworks and you were to buy something for the business, you would actually take a photo of that receipt straight away, put it in your expenses, get it logged into the system, and then when the bank feed comes through, you would match it. That's kind of what you're suggesting. Yep. I agree. I think that's bang on. I think, this just goes back to setting up that system and that having that process to make it really easy for yourself. You lose that receipt, then you're not able to claim. If you get audited, it just becomes a bit of a mess. So I think that makes sense. I have some questions prepared. So if no one from the audience wants to ask anything, I'm happy to go into those. But I just want to give the opportunity before we go into our series of questions. Is there anything in the audience? Anyone wants to ask a question of any of our panel members? You can try ask me, but I'm by no means the brains on the call today, so I can try. All right, brilliant. If you do think of something, please put your hand up and I'll throw to you then. Kerry, I've actually got one for you. So I was talking to a small business owner this week, and they posed a really interesting question to me. They said, I feel like in my business, I have been very, very reactive over the last 2 years. I've started to make a little bit of money, but I really want to step it up. How do I become more proactive? And I've actually been thinking about that for the last 48 hours, and I think that's quite a great way of looking at it. I wanted to kind of gather your thoughts on, for VA specifically, like what have you seen in your experience? Like how do you make that switch and how do you actually become more proactive?
Yeah, I think it does tie back to a lot of having systems and processes, because when we're reactive, we're obviously responding to what's in front of us in that immediate moment. But when we have systems and processes in place, we know the urgency is either real or not. So we're less reactive, if that makes sense, or we have that routine where every Monday we do our receipts and reconciliation. We know that that's going to happen. We don't need to worry about what's popping up on Thursday because we have our time set. So all these special practices and routines that we have, I think helps us become more proactive because it gives us that space to do so.
Yeah.
And I would also consider looking ahead. So not just looking at now. What do I need to implement in my business in order to stop being reactive? Because when you're reactive, it means something's not working.
Yep, that makes sense. And I think, Michael, me and you were having a conversation about this last week, what Kerry's just said there. How would you see, in the new world of doing things like you said in your introduction, how would you actually think that you could, system is very important, but practically speaking, like what are the actions that you can actually take to kind of increase the growth, have multiple income channels? Like how do you manage that, your pricing? We kind of had a bit of a chat about that a week ago for us personally, and I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so I always like to get very specific. Anytime we're doing marketing or any sort of growth activity, get really specific in what you want to achieve, right? And then also start with the end in mind, right? What is that goal and how are you going to get there? And from a marketing and growth standpoint, what are those stepping stones along the way? I think it's very important to sort of just focus. When you try to specialize in too many different things, it can become tricky, right? But if you get really, really good at one thing and do that nicely, then that's when you start to see that explosive growth and whatnot.
Yep, that makes sense. The other thing that, I've been thinking about quite a lot leading up, and it's getting close to the 30th of June now, but what what would you say, Stephen and Julie, really make this time of year so crazy? You know, we've spoken about systems, we've spoken about setting up a process. What happens if I haven't done that? What happens if I am 12 days away and I know it's coming, but I'm not really sure what to do and what action to take? I'm assuming that you will find that you're not alone. Like, there's a lot of people that would be in my position. But what would those activities be? Like, what are the things that you would recommend we do in the next 12 days?
Okay, so I would just start to gather as much information as you've got. If you've got bank statements that you've used, and I'm assuming you're probably still using a manual system. So if you've got bank statements, go through them, start to mark out what was a business expense, go through all your drawers or the bottom of your ute or whatever it is, and get out any receipts that might have been put away or that you've put in a box or something like that. Try and get everything spread out, and just work out what's missing and you know what you need to track down. So a lot of places these days you can go back and get receipts. I know Officeworks, places like that, you know, they do store things digitally, so that does help a little bit. And I guess the biggest thing would be to make a promise to yourself that from the 1st of July you're going to get organised electronically and sign up and get some software. And
what do you think about generating receipts from ChatGPT, Julie? Do you think that that's a good idea, or?
Oh, no. No.
I think that's a much better idea to go back to Officeworks rather than to do that. So
yeah.
Now you're giving everyone the wrong idea, Johan. You've just given all these people this idea of going to do it now. Oh, that's a good idea. Don't do it.
And don't worry, Johan, we've seen all sorts of things over the years. So yeah, there's look, it's look, the ATO are very smart these days, and if you do eventually get an audit, they can tell what's fake, they can tell what's not. You know, they're pretty smart. So yeah, you just better off to do the right thing right from the start.
That makes sense. You said something in there that I find super interesting. Obviously, full transparency, I obviously work with lots of small businesses and VAs owning an accounting application. But one of the biggest barriers we have when people start with us is actually migrating the data. So as long as it's not the 1st of July, people always say, oh, I'll do it next year because it's a lot of effort for me to get started, especially if you're coming from, you know, you don't have a system before, you're coming in from Excel. I found that really interesting how you were saying about the reconciliation and actually just loading it into Excel. Would you think that there is still benefit in setting up an accounting application or a more, even if it's not sold, there's just more sophisticated system to actually start working through, you know, doing those bank transactions rather than manually in Excel? Would that be beneficial?
Oh, definitely. I think, look, the better your system is, the better result. Look, as Steve said, we still get a lot of people using spreadsheets, and when we go through them, there's quite often a lot of information missing. At least when you're using an app, it captures everything. So whatever goes through your bank account is captured in that system. So you don't forget that you might have put petrol in your car 2 weeks ago and paid for this card, or, you know, what have I done with that receipt? It's all captured in your bank account. So I think, you know, using an accounting application, you know, is definitely, and it doesn't matter when you start, just start. That's the main thing. It doesn't matter. You can patch up the year that you missed manually, but just do it. Just get started.
Yeah, I think, you know, having automatic matching rules as well, Julie, just helps that process a little bit faster. Like, you can set it up and have some automation that's built into these systems that will hopefully save you hours and hours of you manually going through. Sorry, Stephen, mate, I cut you off.
I was just going to say, just be careful of misinformation out there in the media. Harvey Norman, Officeworks, this time of year, banging out those ads on telly. You know, if you buy this, you're going to get all your money back 3 weeks later. Just be careful of that, because that's generally not the case, even though there are some exceptions where you can actually get immediate deductions for certain items if you're a registered business. But just be aware of that, because a lot of people roll up to Harvey Norman, buy a new laptop, and don't really have the money for it because they think they're going to get it back pretty soon. Whereas only going to be a small amount you can get as a tax deduction. Just be careful of that. I'm actually pretty surprised that they're not required to give a little bit more caveats in relation to their information that they're given. So that actually causes a lot of confusion out there.
And Stephen, that's a really interesting point. I think, even just personally for my own tax this year, we had this big budget that got released, I think, a month ago or so. I don't even fully understand what all those things mean. So when you're saying, in some cases it works, is that the instant asset write-off?
Asset write-off.
Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, so the instant asset write-off has been brought in to encourage businesses to spend money, basically, to improve the economy and various other things as well. So in certain instances, for example, if you're a tradie and you're buying big ticket equipment at the end of the year, then you can write all that off. There's some instances where you can purchase vehicles and things like that, but just clear it with your accountant first, because the rules are fairly complicated. Rather than go out and buy, you're better off giving your accountant a call and saying, I'm thinking about buying this. What do you think? And then we'll give you an idea of what the ramifications are going to be on your tax and how much you will save, et cetera, et cetera. But there's so many things you can purchase. That's what we generally will just say, give us a call first before the end of the year. Another thing that's worth mentioning really quickly too is a quick check of the structure that you've got that have been running at the end of the year. Because if you are going to change structures at all, a good time to do it would be, heading into July with the new financial year. So there's certain structures, of course, that are more tax effective, better for asset protection. And if you've got a growing businesses, you have to really keep an eye on that too. And that's the best thing to do, is have a quick chat with your accountant just to see if you're still on the best structure. We're very honest with that. If you're on the right structure, then don't keep on doing what you're doing. But if there's a way that you can save some money in the next financial year, then we'll certainly give some advice in relation to a change that might be required.
If I just take that a step further then, right? So let's say I've got my systems in place. I've done a good job. Even if I didn't have a great year with my systems, I've now fixed it up before the end of the year. I see it as a really good opportunity to get to the 30th of June and do a bit of a business reset. If I've done that, I've put everything into the accounting application, what that probably means is that I've now got a better overview and understanding and a clearer picture of the numbers that I have in my business. And Michael, I'm keen to get your advice here, and Kerry, you as well. I'm not sure who would be best to answer first, but what springs to mind straight away is, the different ways that I could probably price my services. And I know that VAs obviously do quite a variety of services. So there might be retainer models, there might be, fixed prices, there might be time and materials, you might be billing on time, you might just be billing on milestones, all of those things. How do you actually work out, if I've got my numbers sorted, how to maximize that and be able to benchmark my pricing and increase my margins, hopefully? Michael, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I always go with the approach of having sort of like a tiered pricing structure, and really knowing what you're worth, and it sort of comes back to what I was talking about before in regards to, if you become a specialist in one area, you can obviously charge more, right? I'll use the sort of analogy, it's a bad analogy, but like when you go to a restaurant and they do everything, whether it's like steak, pizza, pasta, whatever, are you going to go to that restaurant or are you going to go to the steakhouse? You're probably just going to go to the steakhouse because they do steaks really well. I would say that's the same in business, right? Like focus on what you do very well. What is your skill set that you're really good at, that other people can't compete with, and then that's how you can price yourself, right? If you become really, really good at one particular thing, price yourself accordingly, right? Rather than trying to do too much. And then you can market yourself better as well. Because from an SEO standpoint and marketing standpoint, the more specific you get, the easier it is to market yourself. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes sense to me. I mean, I haven't ever, when I was working, for time back in the day, like thought about a tier pricing model. I was always just looking at Googling what is this service worth, and kind of throwing that in there as opposed to probably stress testing that a little bit. So I find that very valuable. I don't know, Kerry, if you've got the same kind of line of thought, or if you've got a bit of industry.
Yeah. So probably what I would be looking at the end of the year is, I think quite a few VAs will have a tiered pricing model, or either retainers or outcome-based pricing. But what I think they really need to be looking at the end of the year is, once you have all your numbers together, is specifically your margin.
Yeah.
Because ultimately subscriptions go up every year. And if we don't change our pricing accordingly, then that margin's just going to get eaten away in all our OPEX. So I think it's really important for us to make that review, go through and check to see if we actually need all those subscriptions, because, you know, the amount of times we sign up for things and forget about them because we signed up for the free trial and we were 100% going to go in those 7 days and never did, and now we're paying for something we don't use. Doing all that kind of fine tuning to strip out anything that's no longer required and make sure that that margin is growing, not shrinking. And any training and expertise that we've gained over the 12 months, we should be having those pricing conversations with our clients.
And how would you approach that? I mean, personally, I find that probably one of the most hard conversations that you could have is, you know, hey, I've been doing this service for you for 2 years, but, you know, I'm going to have to increase the price when you probably know that they're struggling or not making us as much money or whatever it might be. Like, how do you actually broach that conversation?
Look, it is tricky. It's always easier to increase the price on a new client than it is an existing. I'm not going to lie. But honestly, I think it just depends. It comes down to you. So quite often, a lot of what we may do may not be industry standard. So we will generally increase the price on new clients and hold existing for a longer period than not. And that's because by the time the new clients come in and you average out the rate, it works out as a price increase anyway. So that's just my way of thinking, purely because it's easier for me. But and it works out in the end. But it's not that difficult, like, to have that conversation. We have templates and all kinds of things that can help support that. But customers expect it, right? All of their subscriptions go up every year. All their other contractors go up every year. Why don't you? Right?
Makes sense to me. Everything else is becoming more expensive, not just your subscription.
Absolutely. That's right. So it's your experience. The longer you're in that one particular business, your experience is very valuable. And it's no different if you were an employee in that business, that you would be deserving of a pay rise. So it's no different because you've got that level of expertise.
And it's pretty easy to justify. I'll just jump in. Like, when you think about the currency debasement and inflation numbers, when you add those together, it's pretty easy conversation to have and say, you know, everything's going up because of inflation and currency debasement. So it's justifiable by every stretch. Don't be afraid to not, communicate that.
Yeah, and I'm assuming, you know, you probably would have I'm assuming that you have got a really good relationship with this client of yours, and, you know, there's an open and transparent conversation about some of these costs and things, you know, and you value your time. I'd imagine that's really what it comes down to, right?
Yep. I probably wouldn't ask the client who's pissed off to put the prices up. Don't ask them yet. Wait until you smooth it back.
You've said that in a better way than me. You've articulated that much clearer. Kerry, I know that you'll know the answer to this one because we've had this conversation in the past. But I mean, if you've got access and you've got these clearer numbers, like, what are the metrics and things that you are looking at? I know you've just mentioned margin, and to me, you know, I don't know what the benchmark margin would be for you. I don't know, in your specific niche what that would look like. I don't know if my pricing is above or below that. I don't know if my expenses and costs are above or below that. How do you approach all of that? I know you have a love of dashboards, probably similar to me, so you've probably got a smart answer to this, but like, how would you approach that? If you're first time, maybe new to the industry, how would you price that service? How would you get that client?
Yeah, so for someone coming into the industry, trying to work out what their hourly rate would be, is I generally recommend that you need to, when you're looking at the hourly rate, it's not $100 an hour. It's not $70 an hour, right? Whatever you're charging your client, it's not actually that what you're getting paid per hour. You need to consider that you're taking GST out. You've got to put that aside. You need to take out, put aside 10% for leave every time you get paid so that you have that when you take leave. You need to put aside money for PAYG so that you're not stung at the end of the year and have a bill and can't afford to pay it. You need to put aside things for expenses. So as long as I usually say, excluding your GST amount, if you allow for 40 to 50% put aside, that's what your effective hourly rate is. And if that is lower than what you were as an employee, then it's too low. That's how you need to look at it. Because everyone goes, oh, I get paid $70 an hour. I'm like, that's fantastic, but you're really only getting 35.
Yeah.
Is that actually what you were getting paid, or is that less? So you're worth way more than that.
And do you have a calculator or something, Kerry? Like, have you got a little tool that does this?
Yeah, we've got a pricing calculator that they can
I
have access
imagine
to,
if you can just punch in 2 or 3 numbers, it's pretty easy to work it out as opposed to having to screw it up.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. I mean, Julie, Stephen, you guys would see this all the time, and I'm assuming you provide advice when you see this. When you guys go through, I guess, and do someone's tax, do you discuss opportunities or where you see potentially people are spending too much money? So to Kerry's point, maybe you can't really help that much on the revenue side or winning new business, like Michael was saying, but on the other side to make some savings, maybe that redundant subscription that you're not really using anymore. Do you guys provide that kind of advice, and how do you have that conversation with your clients?
Not formally, Johan, but we certainly get people to ensure that they're looking regularly at their statements and going through and highlighting the things. What is that? What's that for? That's something from 6 months ago we thought we'd cancelled. It's very powerful to be able to go through and get rid of 10% of your costs in that way, and you'll find that it'd be very unusual for you to be missing it all. I think just getting back to pricing as well, just 2 types of pricing, and I do the pricing for our company. We do a blanket CPI increase, which I think is about 4.5% at the moment. But in our industry, that's based on a basket of goods that's just general goods. So the 4.5% generally won't cut it in our industry. We usually try and put up to about 6%. So we do a 6% rate hike across the board every year without fail, unless it's a special price or a lead-in or something that's a loss leader. The other thing too is if you productize your services to a degree, then you're going to find it a lot easier to be able to measure how much margin is in each of those, and it's a lot easier to manage as well. You put your services into a basket effectively, and then you apply the CPI increase if you would for that. But also, as Michael pointed out, you've got to look at the skill set that you're providing. It's all about the outcome. It's what you're actually delivering to the clients rather than the amount of time that you spent with them. It's all about that these days. And the more highly skilled your staff are, then the better result you'll get. And usually they're more efficient as well. So just concentrate on that side for the pricing, we believe.
Yeah. No, that makes sense to me, mate. I think every time that we have a conversation, it just makes sense to me to have an accountant. I don't think that I personally would run a business without having an accountant, because I think there's so much to think about and so many things that you don't know. I think that's probably a really big thing for me. Just on that then, to kind of feed into that, like what have you seen over the last 15 years where you have seen VA specifically, if you can, where do they leave the most amount of time or money on the table, if I can ask it like that? Like what are the common things that people are doing where if they were doing something else or not doing it, potentially, actually making more money, saving time, what are those things?
So you're asking me this one?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking that kind of leads into what you're asking, but I think that Kerry probably would have a really good answer to this one as well. So happy to throw to Kerry if she's better placed.
I think that's right, the Kerry are probably the best. I'm talking too much.
No worries.
Not talking too much. I think one of the biggest things is that a lot of VAs don't track their non-billables.
Yeah, okay.
And so all that admin that we're talking about, that they need to have good systems in place and need to get done on a regular basis, if they track that, then they can actually, it also then ties back to pricing.
Yeah, that makes
right?
sense.
Because they're hours that you work in the business that you're not effectively getting paid for. So you need to be paid elsewhere. So your rate needs to be reflected to allow for that time. So I think that's one of the biggest things that they're letting go. They just don't track that time, and they have no idea how much of that is pulling them out of billable work. They could potentially take on an additional client if they had better systems or software, like if they weren't using spreadsheets and they were using Solve, for example, or they were using, you know, some other automation software to take care of a few things that did things on a regular basis. They could eventually expand, or they could put on a contractor, or they could get someone else to come in and just do that admin for them because their time is more valuable with clients.
Yeah, time tracking is very important. I believe we don't time track a lot, but we use time tracking to determine which clients we're losing money on effectively. And then we reinvestigate the pricing that we're charging them, potentially to put it up a little bit based on what we're actually spending time on. Rather, a lot of accountants do bill by the hour, as you might know, which we kind of move away from that. We're more on the results basis, or we do a fixed price per month. So there's no surprises for those months. But time tracking, and there's a lot of good time tracking pieces of software out there. It's just a matter of knowing when to turn it on. That's so definitely the way to go. I think Johan's got a great new practice management solution coming out for accountants. I know that will do time tracking. So we'll
definitely do that for you. I mean, actually, we've with the help of Virtually Yours, we actually built a time tracking tool into the small business app recently as well, which is fantastic. I actually have a question on that, Kerry. When we were doing that build, we'd been about 60% of the way through, and then had a chat to you guys, and then we actually backed out 40% of it and actually redid it to kind of rework that. One of the things I found really interesting was that, the ability to project manage as well, and linking that into projects. So not just tracking it by client, but you might be doing two or three different projects where you might be, billing time and materials to do one thing, but you have a fixed retainer on another thing. When you're talking about, non-billables as well, would you be tracking that to that project level? So you would actually be allocating, I've done 2 hours of admin that I can't bill for to that project, so you can actually see where you're making your money.
You're asking me?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yes, yeah. So, okay. First things first is I would suggest if they're not tracking non-billables at all, just start tracking. Yep. And then I'm a data girl, so I like the breakdown because that tells me who I need to hire next. So for me, that's really important. Like if I'm doing 10 hours a week in accounting stuff, then, clearly I need a bookkeeper or something along those lines. Or if I'm doing 10 hours a week in marketing, then, let's get that off my plate, right?
Yep.
So if they're not doing it at all, at least start, and then start splitting it out so that you know exactly where you're spending your time. Are you getting return on investment in spending that much time on marketing every week?
Yep. And so just on that then, Michael, I think we've spoken quite a lot, not just VAs, but just small businesses in general. Like, what are your thoughts on like a business plan, keeping that up to date? Kerry's just mentioned their return on investment, which is, what a great way to run your business if you can do that. Like, what are your thoughts on that? And what's the easiest way to do that? Because business planning is always this big buzzword, but actually making that practical and implementing it is quite difficult.
Yeah, well, I think in business, things change all the time. You're always evolving, right? You're always growing. If you're not growing, you're dying. And so because of that, you have to continually change your business plan. Like, what are your forecasts? What are your growth goals? Where's the next revenue coming in? All of that good stuff. You have to track it. You have to have the systems and process in place to be able to do it. And then when you get to the point where you want to get exponential scale, that's when that becomes super important, right? All of those systems, the processes, all of that stuff will help you achieve that scale. So very, very important.
I guess that makes sense. And I'm just thinking now, we spoke about pricing before. You were saying, what training you've done and that kind of thing. What happens, Julie, with the CPD and the professional development hours? Like, how does that work with tax? Like, if I'm making a decision to go do a course and upskill, I know that some courses nowadays are quite expensive. Like, is there a decision to be made around, do I buy this tax year or next tax year, or would you recommend just to hop in and do it as fast as possible?
Well, look, there's a couple of things with CPD purchases that it must relate to what you're actually doing now. So if you're looking at doing something for a career that you might get down the track, the ATO probably won't let you claim that. So it has to be directly related to your current income in your business. And for a VA business, that's probably fairly broad because there's a lot of skills that are encaptured in that occupation. So, but obviously, for a ridiculous thing, like if you're working as a VA and you want to go and do a job, you want to go and get a job and study medicine, something like that is not going to be tax deductible. It has to relate, and you have to be able to show that it's that it relates. So that's probably the first thing. The other thing, when you do it, look, I don't, most things come around on an annual basis or on a subscription basis. So I think it's just working it into what suits you. But as accountants, we have to do a certain number of CPD points each year, and definitely do we race towards the end and suddenly start watching lots of videos and things like that as we get to the end of the year, definitely, to make sure we get our numbers up. But I think it's more about what's going to bring value to your business, that is a good, that becomes a good investment.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just conscious that we've got 8 minutes left and I've got one question left for each of the panel members. I thought what I might do at this point is just open the floor again. Is there anything online, any questions, anything that you've heard that's prompted something that you've got in your own business that you want to work through and ask these wonderful people? No pressure, obviously. I know it's quite daunting talking in front of all of these random new faces. So don't feel the pressure. You can always send it through afterwards as well, and I can bring you into contact with these lovely folks. But I just wanted to open the floor if you did have something. Marion.
It's just a little question. Like, I've set up my soul and everything, but I'm not confident that I've done it correctly and that when I'm doing the bank feeds that I'm doing it correctly. Is there a one-on-one that I can do with somebody to check whether what I'm doing is right? Because I think that it's just the confidence of knowing if what I've done is right, and then going on for years and years going, yep, I'm doing this right. It's just at the moment I'm going, don't know if I'm doing this right.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't I actually get Shashir to set up a meeting with you afterwards? He'll reach out to you and then you can do a one-on-one. So, I mean, just talking from a soul perspective, we offer that one-on-one service. So you can always book half an hour with our team and we're happy to help you if you've got any questions. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to help you with your tax or accounting advice. For that, I will have to throw you to your accountant or to Julie and Stephen to help you with that. But, from an AF perspective, we're always happy to help you. So please, don't even worry about it. Shashir will reach out to you afterwards and we'll set something up for you. The last question that I have is, Kerry, we'll start with you, but I would like to know if you could change one habit from the 1st of July, or if maybe you want to change one habit from the 1st of July, but what are you going to do to basically make the next year a better year?
Oh, how come I got the hard question first?
Well, I'm going to ask everyone. Unfortunately, you're just the first one to get it, so everyone else can have a bit more time to prepare.
I think it's the one habit to kind of be really focused this year is really eye on the prize kind of focus this year. So there has been a few moments throughout the last 12 months where that hasn't been as easy. So this year things are shifting, and I think it's coming to that time now where it's hardcore focus.
Makes sense. That's a great answer. I think that is very, very important. Obviously, if you're not focused, it's just not going to happen. I think it's basically like that. So, Julie, can I throw to you next? You're next to my screen, so I'm just going to go through over it, unfortunately. Sorry.
Look, I mean, my list of things I probably could change on the 1st of July is probably way too long. But the one thing that I always give advice to people in business, and this covers just about every business, is spend more time working on your business than in your business. And that's a really, we live in such a fast-paced world and everything is very hectic, and we're just getting through what we've got to get through every day. We're sort of surviving in a way. The days of sort of having extra time where you can plan and do things seem to be long gone in business. So I always say, you know, carve out some time that you can just work on your business. Get away from your desk. Just let yourself be a bit creative, I think, and think about where your business wants to go, because it's very easy. Time goes by very quickly, and suddenly you've done 3 years in your business and it's not as satisfying as it was because you're still doing the same thing. So I try and emphasize that a lot with clients, particularly hands-on clients. And I think virtual assistants would be that, where you're on the tools all day. You need to stop and ask, where do I want to be in 6 months, and what can I do now to make sure that I get there?
Yeah. And I think, you know, having advice from external parties like we had today, I think is so beneficial. Like, even just for me personally, like there's been some things that I'm thinking about now for running our business about how we can do that better, what numbers we need to have a look at. You know, if you want to set yourself up for growth, what thinking do you have to put into that around pricing and a few different things. Don't worry, Marion, I'm not going to increase the price of salt just yet, so I wouldn't stress you out about that. Stephen, do you want to go next?
Well, Julia, it's funny. That's one that I had to work on the business. But one thing for the last couple of years, I've been sort of listening to people a bit, and they said how to improve things. And they said journal. And I go, no, journaling, that's a lot of garbage. You know, like writing stuff down. You know, your thoughts and, you know, what's making your day, what's your challenges are. Like this guy convinced me, so I got a journal sent to me on Amazon, and I've started journaling in the morning and also at night, just for 10 or 15 minutes. And to tell you what, it makes a massive difference. Helps you retain things like that. It gets you channeled into the right type of energy. Kind of makes you a bit happier as well, because you've got those thoughts out of your head and onto paper. And that's a big difference that I found. So it's one thing that I thought wouldn't work, but that really does. And I'd recommend, you can buy for $10, you can buy a journaling thing on, that'll last you for 2 months. And I'd recommend it highly.
Thanks, man. I think that's really good. When you started that sentence, I thought you were talking about journaling from an accounting perspective, and I wanted to say, please stop. I thought that was your job. So I'm glad that we ended up with a journal every morning and every evening. That's a lot better. So,
what I try and do is do a to-do list at the end of the day, so then I know what I'm doing in the next day, and being able to tick those off. And yeah, I find that helpful.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I think you're not even working then, but subconsciously you're actually solving those problems already. So when you wake up in the morning refreshed, your brain is already ticking over and you're much more efficient. Thank you for
adding that. Give you some advice on the to-do list. Do not look at a to-do list before you go to bed, ever. If you ever want to get any sleep, make sure it's out of the way by 6 p.m. Otherwise, you're in trouble.
Great advice. Shishia, going to go next?
Yeah, sure.
So what is one habit that you would change?
Just thinking about it. I guess that's the one habit that I need to implement rather than change, is getting a to-do list done at the end of the evening. That's way too important for me in this role, because there's so many things moving early morning. It just seems a lot. So yeah, thanks, Marion. I'm gonna start doing that. And Stephen, that last note was really good, because I was thinking, yeah, I'm going to do it at late night. I realized, no, I won't be able to sleep if I do that. Yeah.
Before sleep, no.
All right, lucky last. Michael, what are your thoughts?
So my thoughts kind of align with what everyone else has spoken about, but I'd say really focusing on making yourself irreplaceable, right? And creating value in the economy. When you create value and real value, I think it goes a long way, right? Like, businesses aren't going to replace people of value. And if you're doing a good job and your skill set is irreplaceable, it's going to be very, very difficult to sort of, AI and all of this stuff replace you, right? So I think that's really the focus is how do you become irreplaceable? and it sort of ties in with what everyone's been talking about. I traded financial markets for over 10 years, and one of the things we did was journaled every single trade. So what Stephen was saying before about journaling, it's a huge thing. It's, trading financial markets is a performance type role. You only get paid if you win in your trades, and it's the journaling. So yeah, make yourself irreplaceable, journal lots. I'd agree with what everyone said.
Yeah, and it sounds to me like, all of these things have one thing in common, and that's actually enjoying what you're doing, being passionate about it. If you're journaling about it, if you're writing about it, if you're writing to-do lists, all of those things mean that you're enjoying what you're doing. So I think that's a great one to end on. So thank you, Michael. 1 minute over. So once again, I didn't keep my promise. So apologies about that. I'm 0 from 2 at this stage for this end of financial year. I just wanted to say thank you again to each and every one of the panel members. Thank you for taking the time and investing it with us and in this industry. Thank you, Esther. And thank you everyone else for joining. Like I said, I know that it's a very busy time of year, and thank you for taking the time to invest it back in your business. And what we'll do at the end of this is the team will send out a little snippet. You'll get a video of this if you want to refer back to it. We'll also share the contact details of our lovely panel members. If you've got a specific question for them, please feel free to reach out. There's no obligation. We're all just here to help. We're not here to sell you anything. So thank you for making the time. And I hope to see you next time when we do this again. So
thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.